Okay, so remember that they're changing my voice. Because I have no one helping me, when I make the longer videos, the fumes and technology seem to kick in more, so let's try to keep this short. Job 30, verse 18. In his great power, God becomes like clothing to me. He binds me like the neck of my garment. He throws me into the mud, and I am reduced to dust and ashes. This is Job complaining about what God is doing to him. And it is to test him. Okay, and he doesn't know what's going on, and so he panics. A mistake that I do not make. I never blame God. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about before the storm. So again, this part is very key. Write down Job 30, verse 21, and Proverbs 30, verse 4. Between these two, you should see clearly that there's a reason why God is being compared to the top martial artist ever, and vice versa. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about before the storm. So how do we know it's not Mike Tyson? No disrespect to Mike Tyson. You know, he's considered by many the greatest boxer in American boxing, the greatest American boxer in history. But he doesn't have a divine driving force. And I would outmaneuver him, and I would strike him in the knee, in the throat, in the neck, in the groin, in the eye, in places that a warrior strikes on the battlefield. The might and my wisdom and my power would overcome him. So when we see here in the verse 21 again, it says, you turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. And we go back to Proverbs 30, verse 4. Let's do the New Living Translation first. Who but God goes up to heaven and comes back down? Who holds the wind in his fists? Who wraps up the ocean in a cloak? Who has created the whole wide world? What is his name, and what is his son's name? Okay. So he holds the wind in his fists, is what it's saying in Proverbs 30, verse 4. And Job 30, again, it's 30. Just like Isaiah 30, verse 30 is key. Job 30, Proverbs 30, Isaiah 30. It says that you turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about before the storm. So again, we see that it's talking about God, and it's talking about God's right hand, and the arm of God, the right hand of God, is said to be the king. So Job, in one point, he's talking about how God used to exalt him as king, and he stood among his troops. Now another king, is his argument, is, beating him as fine as wind-blown dust, as it says in Psalm 18:42. So you see that connection. His hand is gathering up the wind, like I've been saying for years, gathering up the marshaling force of God. Okay, in a sense, the wind itself is God's hand, right? It blows things around, it marshals them, it places them in certain places, it affects the ocean, what have you, and it moves sand on the beach, as well as other forces like the water. So it says, you turn on me ruthlessly with the might of your hand, you attack me, you snatch me up and drive me before the wind, you toss me about before the storm. And over here it says, whose hands have gathered up the wind? New Living Translation, who holds the wind in his fists. Who holds the wind in his fist? So the hand is interchangeable with fist. Okay, now we go to Job 36, verse 30. See how he scatters his lightning about him, bathing the depths of the sea? This is the way he governs or nourishes the nations and provides food in abundance. So this is the way the king governs. God governs through the king. God governs without the king through the forces of nature, what have you. It's the way he governs. He uses various tools. He fills his hands with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. So it says that he scatters his lightning about him, bathing the depths of the sea. And it says he fills his hands with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. Okay? So who's wrapped up the waters in the cloak, right? The clouds, are connected to the cloak. How do we know that? Job 26:8. He wraps up the waters in his clouds. Job 26:8. He wraps up the waters in his clouds. Yet the clouds do not burst on their way. We go back to Proverbs 30, verse 4. It says, who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak? So the cloak is interchangeable with clouds. In fact, the word cloak is even like the word clouds. C-L-O-A-K versus C-L-O-U-D. U-D-S. You see how that works? Watch this several times if you get confused. Because I have to kind of piece this together for you. So, the lightning from his hands are bathing the water. And he says, whose hands have gathered up the wind? Right? The storm, the clouds, the wind, the lightning, the rain. Who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak. And it says again, see how he scatters his lightning about him, bathing the depths of the sea. The word uses scatters, like scattering the enemies in combat. Scattering the children of Israel for their sins with the marshaling force of God. It goes on to say, he fills his hand with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. Okay? So the hands, and they're mighty hands. And they're striking fast, and they're potent, and they're powerful. So going back to Proverbs 34, and I'm going to wrap this up. I didn't want to make this video this long. It says, who has gone up to heaven and come down? Well, let's go ahead and start with Proverbs 1. Proverbs 30, verse 1. Sayings of Agur, son of Jechon, inspired utterance, this man's utterance to Ithiel. I am weary, God, but I can prevail. Surely I am only a brute, not a man. I do not have human understanding. I have not learned wisdom, nor have I attained to the knowledge of the Holy One. Who has gone up to heaven and come down, whose hands have gathered up the wind. So he's saying that he's just a brute force martial artist, and he's not that holy, and he wants God to bless him, and so on and so forth. That's what he's saying in his opinion. He says he hasn't attained the wisdom of the top martial artist ever, right? Martial is marital scramble, Christ is the bridegroom. Who has gone up to heaven and come down, whose hands have gathered up the wind, who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak, who has established all the ends of the earth. What is his name and what is his son's name? Surely you know. Oh, I remember I promised I was going to go over Job 37. Real quickly, let's touch on Job 37. So Job 36 ends with he fills his hands with lightning and commands it to strike its mark. His thunder announces the coming storm. Even the cattle make known his approach, or its approach. Job 37. At this my heart pounds and leaps from its place. Listen to the roar of his voice, to the rumbling that comes from his mouth. He unleashes his lightning beneath the whole heaven and sends it to the ends of the earth. So you see, you have the various components there. You have the wind. You have the water. Okay? In the New Living Translation, it calls it the ocean. Right? So the water, the seas, the ocean. You have the lightning, which is connected to the hands. Right? Whose hands have gathered up the wind. In the most intense form, it's like a storm, right? Or it's a hurricane, it's a tornado, it's a storm, it's a lightning storm, right? Variations, right? Okay? And we see that the waters connect, and he wraps up the waters in a cloak. He wraps up the waters in his clouds, Job 26:8. And we see the ends of the earth also in that same section. The book of Job is key in understanding Proverbs 34. And it talks about the marshaling force of God. Okay? Think about the halo over Christ's head in popular culture. It's a false image of Christ, but they depict it with a sun halo. The sun's a symbol of the bridegroom. Well, it's also the lightning and the light, the sun and the sunlight. Okay? So he's also conveying, the sun is a symbol of God and the bridegroom at the same time, where they overlap, what have you. He's conveying, he's drawing on the Spirit of God. He says, of myself I can do nothing. Right? The Father is greater. Christ says stuff like this. He's drawing on the Spirit of God. Okay? And he's drawing on it as a character in the story as the heavenly warrior who defeats the beast. Okay, so now I've definitively proven that it's about martial arts, and with my Kuro Obi black belt, with my top martial arts challenge, with my moral arguments why everyone else is lying to you. It's not enough to expose the government or the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, to expose evil. You have to point to good. You have to point the way. The messenger points the way. By them not pointing to me, by them not bringing up martial arts, Royal African Falcon martial arts, the significance of Hebrew being the Afro-Asiatic language, we can go on and on. The significance of Genesis 10, by them not bringing this stuff up, or something that's just as good as that which they do not do. They've made it clear that they don't have the requirements to be the true representative of God, the leader, the top martial arts, what have you. I walk in the light. I walk in the light of truth. I don't obscure things. God is not the author of confusion and disorder, but of sound judgment, mental clarity, of truth. He sends the darkness on the wicked, but he doesn't confuse everyone from the start. He wants people to first see the truth and make a decision. And if they choose to be evil, they go into darkness. What the Western society has done, like every nation on this planet, they start off with the Luciferian lies and propaganda and church propaganda, and there's levels of propaganda. A lot of people point to the Catholics and certain types. Every church deals only in propaganda and not in truth. And then they say, if you don't conform to their Luciferian light, that you're walking in darkness, but they're also walking in darkness. Luciferian light does not free you from darkness. Lucifer lies. They lie. They point to themselves instead of me. They obey themselves and the government instead of God through me, which is the only way to obey God. To obey God, you have to obey him through me.